Hospitals, food, finance, everything paused on one fragile assumption: the grid would keep humming. What we call the grid acts like one machine. It is. It's three hearts barely stitched together. To see the trap, we need the map. Map of the three hearts: Eastern, Western, Texas. Start with the illusion. From Maine to Miami to Chicago, you flip a switch and expect the same invisible rhythm, 60 cycles a second. In the Eastern interconnection, by far the largest, millions of machines agree to that tempo down to thousandths of a hertz. Coal units older than their operators, nukes with the patience of mountains, gas turbines that spin up like sprinters, and an ocean of wind and solar all lean on a single shared heartbeat. If one stumbles, the others feel the tug instantly. That's the blessing and the curse, a shared fate at one frequency. Slide west. The Western interconnection stretches over emptiness, sagebrush, desert, long spans of steel marching between far-flung cities. Physics gets harder here. Those long lines act like taut guitar strings. Pluck them wrong, the note wobbles. Operators run with thinner stability margins because distances amplify every twitch. You can move a lot of power across mountain ranges, but the wire's reactance punishes mistakes. A storm in the Columbia Gorge can press Las Vegas a little off balance. The West lives with that every day. Then there's Texas, ERCOT isolated by design. The state built a border out of physics to dodge federal jurisdiction. It's mostly true, ERCOT stays in its lane. The upside is speed. Decisions travel from dispatchers to generators without out-of-state politics in the loop. The downside shows up when the weather bites or plants stumble and help can't arrive fast enough. There are ties to the rest of the continent, but they're DC valves, small on purpose, measured in crumbs compared to need. Those DC ties matter. They convert alternating current to direct, push it across the seam, and rebuild AC on the other side. That conversion buys control. You can meter how much stress crosses a boundary, but it also caps the lifeline. In an emergency, those valves are eyedropper tubes feeding a patient who needs a transfusion. People think the grid has a pilot. It doesn't. It has a council of pilots with different manuals. Inside the Eastern Heart, independent system operators run markets and dispatch, PJM, MISO, NYSO, ISONI, each with its own rules. Vertically integrated utilities still exist, planning wires based on local rate cases. State regulators weigh today's bills more heavily than tomorrow's resilience. Federal regulators oversee reliability standards, but they don't build steel. The result is a patchwork that mostly works until it doesn't. In the West, WECC coordinates reliability, but controls splinters into balancing authorities from the Pacific Northwest to the desert Southwest. Hydro operators ice snowpack, solar developers chase interconnection queues, wildfire seasons redraw risk maps. Keeping frequency steady is a daily choreography with longer, sparser limbs. It's a different kind of stress than the East, but just as unforgiving. ERCOT is its own balancing authority and market. It can act quickly, but it must also stand alone. When cold seizes wellheads or heat loads soar past forecast, every margin inside the fence matters. The market's price spikes are meant to shout, build more, winterize, show up. But price signals don't thaw valves or fabricate transformers on demand. Here's the quiet irony. The three hearts pretend to be one organism for commerce, power trades, hedges, futures, but in physics they break into islands. The lines between them are bottlenecks by design. A handful of high-voltage DC links along the seams, a few scratching into Texas, and that's it. Any talk of a national supergrid runs into a thicket. Permits across dozens of counties, lawsuits, landowner opposition, environmental reviews, and utility turf wars. Meanwhile, load grows, renewables surge, and the machine's choreography gets more complex. Who actually holds the throttle if something big shakes? Operators in control rooms, eyes on frequency, spinning reserve, and contingency lists. They don't debate ideology. They count megawatts and milliseconds, but they work inside the map as it exists. Eastern, Western, ERCOT, inside each, a web of owners and rules. When a line trips in Ohio, a dispatcher in New Jersey feels it in their alarms. When a generator in Arizona sneezes, a Californian battery flinches. When Texas stumbles, the rest can watch and send only a trickle. So three hearts, the East with mass and complexity, the West with distance and tightrope margins, Texas with speed and isolation. Weak stitches between them, that's not an abstract chart, it's the stage where every future crisis will play out. And if the stage is brittle, the props on it, substations, transformers, the iron we rely on, are even more fragile. The hidden choke points, substations and transformers. To see where the machine breaks, you have to stand inside a substation at dawn. Steel lattice, humming buswork, ceramic insulators tall as a person, and at the center, a tank the size of a railcar holding a copper heart in oil. That's the extra high voltage transformer, the device that quietly makes continental trade possible. It takes power at 500 or 345 kilovolts and steps it down to 230, 138, 115 to the levels other lines and cities can drink. Lose one and the map reroutes. Lose a few in the wrong pattern and the dance falters. These aren't off-the-shelf boxes. Each extra high-voltage transformer is custom wound to a substation's quirks, impedance, tap ranges, cooling banks, bushings, and spatial constraints only locals know. Even two that look identical on a drawing may carry different guts. They weigh hundreds of tons. You don't fly them in. You crawl them on special trailers at midnight, bridges checked, permits stamped, police escorts blocking intersections. Every mile is a negotiation. People like to say, we have spares. Sometimes that's true. Often it's a myth that feels comforting. A spare rated at 345 138 kV with one impedance won't necessarily sit where another needs to go. Tap changes won't match. Bushings won't line up with rigid bus. Control cabinets speak different wiring dialects. And if the spare is across the region, you still face the slow motion problem. Weeks to lift, haul, and set, then days to test, dry out, fill with oil, and commission. During that time, the network's stress redistributes across the remaining iron. Substations are the hubs where mechanical physics meets digital control. Power through bus bars, breakers, and isolators, decisions through relays, cabinets, and fiber. You can protect lines with relays calibrated to microseconds, but the trip logic still drives a very physical act. A breaker opens to save itself, and in doing so, pushes current onto the survivors. This is where topology matters. Some yards are built with true redundancy, breaker and a half or ring bus designs that keep multiple paths alive through a fault. Others are simpler, straight buses where one failure slices a swath of capacity. The difference shows up in how far the pain travels. Manufacturing capacity is another quiet choke. The US makes some transformers, repairs others, and imports many. Core steel relies on a niche product, grain-oriented electrical steel, that only a few mills can roll well. Skilled winders and test engineers are not easy to hire. Lead times stretch from months to years, then from years to, we'll tell you when the steel arrives. Utilities place orders and hold their breath. Meanwhile, load grows, storms get meaner, and old units age out with cracked paper insulation and dissolved gases whispering early failure. Known critical sites exist. They aren't labeled on highway signs, but within utility maps, certain transformer banks and substations are tagged as Tier 1 for a reason. They serve refineries, data centers, water treatment, metro cores. You can see their importance by how many lines converge and how few alternate routes exist. In public, these locations are handled quietly, no need to advertise the spine. But attackers with patience can read environmental filings, satellite imagery, and land records. The machines aren't hiding under mountains, they stand behind fences in the wind. Fiber and copper make these places legible to control rooms. Conduits run under gravel, up steel, into relay houses where climate control keeps electronics just right. Cut the wrong bundle, and a dispatcher's screen goes blind. Hit the control house, and breakers may default to safe, often open states that remove power to avoid fires. That's a feature for crew safety, a liability in a coordinated hit. You don't need Hollywood-grade explosives to cause trouble. A few rifles, a map, a timing window, and knowledge of which radiators bleed oil quickest can sideline a bank for months. Even without malice, the bottlenecks bite. A lightning-induced fault that welds a breaker shut can force an emergency reconfiguration that overloads a sister transformer just as heat drives demand. Protective relays trip to save copper, and the substation's topology becomes your fate. Operators can call for emergency ratings, squeeze a little more through with extra cooling or shed load. But those are short bridges. Once a winding cooks, you're not talking hours, you're talking seasons. Spares programs exist, regional pools, shared frameworks, standardized footprints, they help. But standardization runs into legacy. A 1978 yard retrofit doesn't care about a 2025 footprint. Pads don't align, clearances differ. Rebuilding a bay to accept a standard spare takes time you won't have mid-crisis, and storing spares isn't free. Oil ages, seals dry, space costs money, and maintaining readiness competes with rate cases that prize near-term savings. There's a human factor too. The substation tech who hears a transformer sing wrong can call a test that catches an incipient fault. The crew that knows which knife switch sticks in winter can shave minutes off a manual transfer. Those minutes matter when the grid walks a frequency tightrope and every amp has a destination. Lose that knowledge to retirements and the metal feels heavier. So when we talk about fragility, it isn't abstract fear. It's a map of specific yards, specific banks, and the logistics of moving 100-ton organs through towns that don't know their names. It's a supply chain that can't sprint and designs that assume the next piece will be available when needed. The grid's strength is a network. Its weakness is that some nodes carry far more than their share, and replacing them is slow, expensive, and public. That's the choke, hidden until the day it is. The 1950s machine with 2000s nerves, SCADA, and control. Walk from the transformer yard into the control house and the era changes. Outside is iron and oil. Inside is screens, firmware, and passwords on sticky notes. The grid's nerves are SCADA and EMS, systems designed to watch and steer, not to fight. They were built for reliability in a cooperative world, where devices told the truth and links stayed up. That assumption held until the network took everything online. Remote terminal units, the field's eyes and hands, sit in cabinets behind chainlink and dust. They read breaker positions, voltages, currents, gas pressures, oil temperatures. They also accept commands, open, close, raise, lower. Many speak in dialects older than most operators, Modbus, DNP3, IEC 60875-104. Those protocols were designed when speed beat secrecy. Clear text carried the day. Encryption wasn't common because bandwidth was scarce and hardware was modest. Nobody thought someone would sit on the line and whisper lies into the machine. At the top of that data funnel is the EMS, state estimators crunching snapshots every few seconds, contingency analyzers simulating N1 events, AGC nudging generators to keep frequency steady. It's good at picture making, a living map of flows and limits. It's less good when the picture flickers. Cut the fiber to a substation and the EMS has to guess. Lose a PMU stream and your millisecond eyes go blind. Operators lean on alarms to filter the chaos, but the alarms stack. One fault spawns 20 children, and warning colors wash over screens until red feels normal. Vendor patch cycles run on their own calendar. A manufacturer releases a fix for a relay vulnerability once a quarter. A utility gets a maintenance window once or twice a year. In between, there are change freezes for summer peaks and winter storms. Crews won't risk bricking a device when the load curve climbs, so the patch waits and the exposed window stays open. Multiply that across thousands of relays, RTUs, and servers, and you get a permanent backlog, security debt that never zeros. Meanwhile, human factors cut deeper than any zero day. Operators sit through 12-hour nights watching green turn yellow and back. The system trains them to ignore chatter, false positives, nuisance alarms. Alarm floods create a reflex, silence, acknowledge, move on. In the rare moment when a flood is real, minutes disappear while they sort signal from noise. That's not laziness, it's survival in a room designed to bark more than it bites. After enough bark, even the bite feels like bark. Air gaps used to be the sacred rule, keep the control network off the internet. In practice, air gaps became air myths. You need vendor support for a relay firmware issue. Here's a laptop, here's a jump host, here's a VPN tunnel with a tight time window. A contractor updates a historian with a thumb drive that touched an office PC. A firewall rule stays permissive after an outage drill because nobody wants to break visibility again. The diagram says segmented. The reality says convenience wins on busy days. Flat networks are cheap to build and easy to manage. Segmenting down to the bay level takes planning, labels, cabinet space, and time with wire maps that aren't always current, so traffic roams more freely than it should. A compromise in a corporate domain shouldn't reach an RTU, but it can if the jump box straddles both worlds and credentials cascade. Zero trust sounds clean. In a 1990s substation with a 1970s relay, it looks like adapters and stopgaps and a to-do list pushed to next quarter. Even without attackers, bugs and misconfigurations act like adversaries. A misset relay curve steals margin. A wrong CT ratio makes a line look cooler than it is. A failed GPS clock drifts phaser measurements and poisons state estimation. These are digital errors with mechanical consequences. A breaker opens, a generator trips, a line sags into emergency rating. The feedback loop is unforgiving. What the software believes becomes what the metal does. And yet these systems keep the machine upright most days. Operators use SCADA like an instrument panel on a plane with patched wings. They know which tags are flaky, which radio links bounce in bad weather, which substation goes quiet when the microwave repeater fogs up. They build mental models of trust. This measurement is real. That one needs a call. This particular transformer alarm is late after a reboot. That human layer papers over design, gaps the way duct tape holds a glove box shut. Vendors are pushing modern segmentation, signed firmware, and anomaly detection tuned to power systems, not office networks. Utilities are testing out-of-band sensors that don't trust SCADA alone, traveling wave fault locators, distributed PMUs, digital twins that scream when the model and the field diverge. Some regions are moving to role-based access everywhere and multi-factor on jump hosts. It's progress, but it arrives into fleets with 3 software generations living side by side. Here's the critical point. Digital weaknesses matter, but physics still calls the shots. You can blind a control room and confuse an operator, yet a hotline still sags, a cold generator still hesitates, and a relay still trips at its threshold. SCADA errors can hasten a fall or hide it, not rewrite gravity. When the grid slips, electrons don't wait for a software patch. The next minutes belong to inertia, frequency, and protection, rules written in copper, steel, and time. Physics does negotiate how cascades start. When screens go blind and radios hiss, the grid doesn't wait for clarity. It settles arguments with frequency. Every motor, generator, and inverter leans on that 60 Hz beat. If load nibbles higher than generation, frequency starts to fall. If generation exceeds load, it climbs. That tiny drift is the first language of trouble, and operators read it in tenths of a hertz while their tools catch up. Old machines help. A coal or gas turbine with a heavy rotor carries inertia, stored energy in a spinning mass. When a plant trips, that rotor doesn't stop instantly. It gives up a gulp of energy to slow the frequency slide, buying seconds. Those seconds are everything. They let governors open valves, let automatic generation control nudge other units, let demand response kick in. But as grids retire synchronous machines and add inverter-fed resources, that free buffer thins. Inverter-based resources can respond fast, but only if they're set to form or support the grid and have headroom. Too often, they're already at the edge. Planning assumes N1, one thing can fail and the system will hold. That's not superstition. It's baked into studies and relay settings. But the world serves NK. A line trips into a tree, a plant stumbles, a gas compressor loses power upstream, and the second loss lands while operators handle the first. Now you're stacking events faster than your playbook. The difference between N1 and N2 isn't just one more failure. It's a phase change in how the grid behaves. Heat makes wires droop. A heavily loaded 500 kV line runs hot, sags inches closer to trees, and its ampacity brushes a limit. Protective relays sit like lifeguards, watching current and voltage angles. If a line exceeds its thermal rating or sees the wrong oscillation, a relay trips a breaker to save the equipment. That act is protective and merciless. The moment it opens, the power reroutes. The survivors pick up the slack, currents jump, and another relay stares at a number it doesn't like. Hidden failures lurk in those relays. A misset zone, a wrong CT ratio, a firmware quirk that misreads a transient, none matter for years, until the day when the operating point pushes into a corner case. Then a relay that should hold for a few cycles trips in one, a backup that should wait steps in early. These aren't cinematic betrayals. They're quiet parameter errors that make the cascade steeper than it should be. Meanwhile, governors and controls are doing math. Turbine governors see frequency dip and try to push more power. If there's fuel and headroom, they help. If there's not, they saturate and stop helping. Wind and solar in grid-following mode ride the voltage and phase that's given. When those wobble beyond their ride-through curves, some decide to protect themselves and disconnect. Others, better tuned, hold on, but only if they were told to. Batteries can throw power in milliseconds, but only up to the limits and only if someone reserved state of charge for support. Markets don't naturally pay for empty batteries,